Hi, class. We're here today to talk about depression and the world affairs, um, 1929 to about through the Great Depression years, the 30s. But first, we're going to recap the Locarno honeymoon and go from there. Okay? Pay attention. All right, so we're looking at the Locarno aftermath and the Depression years. So just to recap the Locarno Pact, we have Gustav Stresemann of Germany, Austin Chamberlain of Great Britain, and Astradian of France, who signed this Locarno Treaty. And we all know that Germany is going to accept the western borders with France and Belgium, and also, there any disputes that were going to be settled were going to be settled by the Council of the League. And Britain and Italy, remember, they served as your guarantors. All right, and that means they came to the defense of anyone that was attacked. So either it could be France, or it could be Germany. If either one was attacked, then Britain and Italy will come to their rescue. All right, and of course, we're going to demilitarize the Rhineland, meaning the troops are going to leave, and Germany, of course, is going to apply and be accepted for membership into the League of Nations. All right. Now, of course, Germany renounced the use of force to recover any territory from France or Belgium, and France had to respect German territorial integrity. All right. So that means, like the instance where they occupied the Ruhr, that will be forbidden under this Locarno Pact. All right. And then France gained a guarantee of British assistance against German attack. All right. Remember, the Council of the League of Nations is going to handle any disputes. All right. Now, one limitation that we look at when we look at the Locarno agreements is the fact that it did not deal with Germany's eastern frontiers. All right. Remember, Stresemann refused to recognize them as permanent boundaries, and that was Gustav Stresemann of Germany. All right. Now, the Soviet Union, they did have a role to play. They sort of looked at this whole Locarno Pact with great suspicion, because remember the Treaty of Rapallo that Germany signed with Russia, and that sort of agreement that they had, and now Germany signing one with Britain and France. All right. So they're looking at this improved relationship between Germany and Western Europe, and they almost could consider this for them to go back into isolation, because now they really don't have many allies or any strong, powerful allies in the world. All right, and of course the Dawes Plan, that whole repayment plan that was set up by the U.S. All right, to repay Germany, to invest in Germany, so Germany could repay her allies. The Soviet Union thought this was a capitalist strategy designed to delay the communist revolution in Germany. All right. Now, Stresemann, the German chancellor, sort of believed that good relations with the West did not necessarily imply hostility towards the Soviet Union. All right, and the Soviets could offer Germany a guarantee in the East should Britain or France confront her in the West. All right. Remember, they're going to, and so later on they're going to sign that Treaty of Berlin, which is just extending the Treaty of Rapallo for 5 years. All right, and basically both nations are going to respect each other's neutrality, all right, in the case of one being attacked by a third power, all right? Don't forget the Kellogg-Briand Pact, all right, which renounced the use of force for national objectives, and it contained no details of what action would be taken should a country defy it. So there we see a major flaw or limitation in this pact, because it didn't necessarily say, all right, if we have an aggressor nation or any nation that's going to act in defiance, what's going to happen. And Japan is actually going to be one of the first countries to act in defiance when they invade Manchuria. So we'll look at that later, the next lecture. All right. Now, also, there were attempts to have the terms of the pact incorporated into the League of Nations, but that ultimately failed. All right. So we have unresolved problems. These unresolved problems, how to resolve armed conflict involving at least one strong power. So how are we going to resolve these issues if we have an aggressor nation? How in the world are we going to achieve disarmament? All right, what are the necessary steps? What are the necessary precautions to achieve disarmament? Is this even possible? And how to guarantee the borders between Germany and the successor states? All right. Once again, these unresolved problems. Britain and France had very different aims and policies. All right. Now, we have to note that economically, Britain and France sort of were competing against the U.S. The U.S. was very strong, and throughout the 1920s, we have this sort of economic boom throughout the world. All right, people were enjoying life, prosperity, the wealth that came about with it. All right. Britain was dealing, of course, with rising nationalism in its empire, so many countries decided, they sought independence, Egypt and India, and Britain sought economic political stability in Europe so it can concentrate on protecting its possessions. So once again, economics is going to play a huge deal here. All right. Now, the best way to ensure German acceptance of the terms of the Treaty of Versailles was to agree to some revisions. All right, because remember, Germans felt that the Treaty of Versailles treated them harshly, and they wanted to sort of revise those terms. All right, France refused to consider the slightest changes to the treaty, and they still were advocating, didn't trust the Germans, even after this Locarno deal. All right, and they were afraid that this might strengthen Germany and pose a future threat to French security. All right, so they still slept with one eye open, so to speak. Okay, now the successor states, and what we mean by successor states are those states that sort of were created after this Austro-Hungarian Empire and Turkish Empire sort of fell apart. All right, and of course, there were threats that these countries might succumb to communism, because they were heavily influenced by the Soviet Union, and the League of Nations, of course, did not have any real military capability, and Britain and USA did not want to give France any military guarantees. All right. So the French government decided, hey, we're going to negotiate these military pacts with the countries on Germany's eastern borders, and hopefully this will help secure our safety in case Germany decides to attack. All right. So these mutual agreements or treaties were signed with France. We had one with Poland in 1921, Czechoslovakia in 24, Romania in 26, and Yugoslavia in 27. All right. And lo and behold, in 1929, Wall Street is going to crash. All right, so the League's attempts at ensuring collective security and international cooperation changed dramatically when this Wall Street crashed. All right, so basically, I talked about this whole boom going on throughout the 20s, and the world economy is going to produce too much. All right, when supply exceeds demand, it's sort of going to cause an economic downturn. All right. So, like the U.S., for example, they were selling lots of goods, and people sought credit. They started to buy a lot of this stuff on credit, borrowing money to pay for these things. All right. So they're buying and selling these stocks, and so you see here how it sort of works. You buy shares in a company, and the company uses your money. All right. And if the company is successful, then more people want to buy these shares, pushing the price of the stock up. All right. So now they're starting to charge more for these shares. And then a shareholder can sell shares and make a profit if the value has risen. So they can ultimately sell this to someone else and make a profit. All right. Because the demand is great. All right. Now, if the company is not successful, then people lose confidence and they want to sell their shares. All right. And the price goes down, and shareholders make a loss. So Europe and U.S. goods. Europe could not afford U.S. goods, and many were protecting their own goods by putting high duties. And what I mean by high duties are high tariffs on American imports. So anything coming from America, there was an extra tax placed on it. So people really couldn't afford these, but they thought these protective tariffs would allow people to them to make money off of these imports. All right. And of course, Canada, India, and Japan, there was existing competition, and many U.S. producers overproduced. All right, there was too much supply, once again, not enough demand, and U.S. companies had no one to sell their products to. So as a result, they started to lose lots of money. All right, so the Wall Street crash of 1929 we just talked about is sort of going to have a worldwide impact. It's not just going to be on the United States. All right. So the U.S. stopped lending money abroad and called in its loans. And in 1930, more than 2,000 banks collapsed. And 3 years later, there were over 12 million unemployed in the United States. Now, of course, like I told you before, the depression is sort of going to impact everyone. So, of course, in Britain, the pound is going to be devalued, all right? And they tries to, once again, those protective tariffs on imports in Britain. And within 3 years, more than 3 million people were unemployed. And most industrial nations were affected. Banks tanked, industry struggled and trade came to a halt. Now, not surprising that the Soviet Union was the least impacted by this depression, all right, because the government sort of controlled all inputs and outputs, all right, and many countries didn't necessarily trade with the Soviet Union, all right. And here you see just a graph depicting the different years and how it affected people the most, all right. Once again, another graph, and this is in 1933 by the numbers that people that were unemployed, all right. So the U.S. stock market began when it crashed in 29, its whole economic crisis. And so most people, when people are hungry, there's depression, people aren't working, that's the focus of the government. It's not necessarily on international relations, more so trying to recover economically. All right? So, of course, this does have political implications, and people started to criticize the government and the democracies for not being able to get a grip or handle this whole economic downturn. And many countries turned to these dictators like Japan, Italy, and Germany. They decided to expand into other countries to seek natural resources and to seek resources to help them recover economically. All right. So the breakdown of trade led to lots of international tensions. Japan is going to actually invade Manchuria. All right, and Italy. All right, we're going to see some instances in Italy, and we'll look at all this a little bit later just to give you a little overview. All right. So once again, the USA, 13 million people are unemployed. All right, and many people blame the Republicans. That was the political party that was in control. Germany, the Weimar government, it broke down. All right, and people turned to Hitler. All right, which promised a better life. And Italy, of course, Mussolini, all right, wanted to take people's minds off it by increasing its power abroad. So we see the rise of these dictators as a result of this downturn. Remember, I told you that's going to create the condition for these dictators to sort of come to power. All right. Britain, of course, democracy survived, but many groups started to turn to communist groups like the Black Shirts. In France, the depression hit later than other countries, but luxury goods like wine left many people unemployed, and goods like silk in Japan would not sell, and Japan's economy was badly affected. So Japan, like I said, tried to take over other countries. All right. So the national income dropped by 50% from 1929 to 1932 in the USA. All right. Of course, we talked about this protectionist idea or theory. All right. These protection tariffs and
Ms. Menang and Ms. Miller, you have parents in the main office. Ms. Menang and Ms. Miller, you have parents in the main office.
Excuse the interruption. Foreign policy in the USA became even more isolationist, and in Germany, the new Chancellor Brüning attempted to divert the attention of domestic problems caused by the Depression. All right, and sort of tried to look at foreign affairs or policies. All right, so in 1932, of course, reparation payments are going to cease, and later, a more nationalist German government increased tariffs on British goods, and the impact of the Depression was one of the main factors contributing to the rise of the Nazi in 1933. Hitler, all right, was appointed Chancellor of Germany. Key point there. All right. So once again, these protectionist policies were enforced in Britain, where they cut government spending.
Ms. Menang, Ms. Katrina Miller, and Ms. Megan Cunningham, you have parents in the main office. Ms. Menang, Ms. Katrina Miller, and Ms. Megan Cunningham, you have parents in the main office.
British governments after 1929 wished to avoid any risk of involvement in European conflicts, as they were more concerned about protecting the British Empire. All right. And please forgive the interruptions. Hopefully you got the gist of this unit, and we'll talk about any questions that you have when this chapter. We'll talk about any questions you have when you come to class. All right. Thank you. Have a good day.